Hello, my name is Marianne Zolota. Most of you know me. And today we're going to do a lecture on the Gilded Age. Now, what exactly was the Gilded Age and when was it? Well, it started around the 1870s, right after our Civil War. It was chronicled by a writer named Edith Wharton, if you've ever read any of her books. For example, The House of Mirth, The Custom of the Country, The Age of Innocence, which was made into a wonderful Scorsese film a few years ago, and also The Buccaneers was made into a series, I believe, on PBS. Now, it was the age of Edith Wharton, but it was also the age of the robber barons. Think of Standard Oil, and the railroads, which grew so exponentially. Eventually, many of them had to be, shall we say, spun out. Because they were so powerful and they had so much control over the politics of this country. Now, the Standard Oil, the railroads, the Rockefellers, J. Fisk, Jay Gould, the Vanderbilts, the Astors. These people had unimaginable money to us. For example, a woman who had a little cottage. Now, you call these cottages in Newport. They were not cottages. They were 20 or 30 room mansions, all right? But they called them their cottages in Newport, Rhode Island. One socialite spent $50,000 a year for perfume to scent her home in Newport. That's an outrageous sum of money for perfume. All right. Now, on November 6th, my birthday, in 1895, was the marriage of Consuelo Vanderbilt to the Duke of Marlborough. The reception was held at the Vanderbilt Mansion on Fifth Avenue, and the house was decorated with thousands of imported orchids. She imported Alva Vanderbilt, who was not to be denied, imported more than 2,500 orchids because some of them would die. Now, that's the reason why I've used the orchid there, because the flower for the Gilded Age was the orchid. And you're going to see a number of orchids in the pictures that I'm going to be showing you. All right, now let's get started first of all, we're going to start with John Singer Sargent. He was the leading portrait painter of the Gilded Age. Now, wait a minute now. Now, this picture here was the first one I left here. I left it in this because this was a picture from the Civil War. It's from 1867, and it's an Eastman Johnson photograph picture of the girl I left behind me. Now, there you see this young girl standing by the edge of the sea. You can see that it's windy because her clothes are being blown about, and she is looking for someone that probably won't come back. Now, remember, this was 2 years after the Civil War, and the wounds from the Civil War were still not healed, and many people had lost their brothers, uncles, fathers, or possible fiancés. And this reflects that. It reflects that period. But by the 1870s, things began to change. And that's when the Gilded Age began, and it went until around just before the First World War. It went through I would say from about the early 1870s to about maybe 1915 or 16. And then, of course, the First World War broke out, and then, again, everything was shattered. Now, I'm going to be talking about this man. This is John Singer Sargent, and that's one of the paintings we're going to be talking about. I want to tell you that John Singer Sargent was born in Florence to American parents who had gone to Europe after the death of their daughter. His father was a physician, and his wife persuaded him to remain in Europe. John Singer Sargent was born there in 1856, and there were also two sisters. The family moved from place to place, especially to foster John Singer Sargent's notable talent. His mother was also an artist, and she realized how talented this boy was. And he also was an accomplished pianist as well. So the father tutored John Singer Sargent in German, French, and Italian. The art training was in Florence, also in Paris at the studio of Carolus Duran, who was probably a great teacher and well known in Paris, and also drawing instruction at the École des Beaux-Arts, also in Paris. In other words, they were fostering this boy's talent. In 1856, he made his first trip to the U.S., and he also, in that year, met none other than Claude Monet, the Impressionist artist. And they began a friendship. And he was to travel to Giverny, and under the influence of Monet, he did many watercolors outdoor, and especially scenes of Venice. So in other words, he could work as a portrait painter to the robber barons' wives and the robber barons as well, but he could also do the impressionism of the style of the Impressionists, which he clearly embraced and enjoyed very much. Now, he continued as a portraitist to the international community and also the American expatriates. He was a huge success when he moved to England. Rodin called him the Van Dyck of the century. He continued painting portraits until the turn of the century, but spent his summer painting in the Impressionist manner and continuing his friendship with Monet. By 1900, he was tired of portraits. "No more portraits," he said. "I abhor and abjure them, and hope never to do another one, especially for the upper classes." However, but this revulsion to portraits could be put aside when he was asked to do the Marlborough family of Blenheim, which was Consuelo Vanderbilt. All right, she was now living in Blenheim, which you know is the Duke of Marlborough, and you know all about that. So I'm going to fill you in on that. There's going to be a very, very interesting twist in this lecture that I'm giving you, okay? Now, in 1890, he got commissions for murals at the Boston Public Library. And in 1916, murals for the Museum of Fine Arts, also in Boston. And in 1921, Harvard called him. Harvard said, "We want you to come and do some murals for us," which he did. He also traveled widely to Egypt, Greece, Spain, Turkey, and Syria, and Palestine, and Lebanon as well. 3 days before he was set to sail from England to Boston to oversee the mural installation at the Museum of Fine Arts, he died. 3 days before he was going to leave on April 15th, 1925. And he was due to leave three days later to come from England to Boston. Okay, now we're going to get started on writing. Now, no, this is not, all right. One of his most successful paintings, which is in Boston, by the way, is called The Daughters of Edward Boit from 1882. Boit was a Harvard-trained lawyer and gave up his profession to pursue painting in Paris. Now, a lot of Americans during the Gilded Age chose to go to Paris or chose to go to London. They wanted to go to Europe, and many of them became so enraptured there that they didn't want to come back home. So they were called the expatriates, expats, all right? Now, they lived, Edward Boit and his family lived in an area favored by wealthy Americans in Paris, the 8th arrondissement, which is still a very, very classy place to live in Paris. The lifestyle was fueled by the wife's money. In other words, the husband didn't have the money, though he was a Howard lawyer, but the wife had the money. The girls here are painted individually, with no connection between them. Now, in 1879, Sargent had gone to Madrid, and he has seen the works, the Velázquez work, Les Meninas, and he kind of incorporated some of the spacing here. Now, the little girl is sitting on the rug, okay? And there's the other one there, but the other two girls are hiding in shadow. They are not communicating with each other. They are not playing with each other. The older ones might have been shy or thought it was silly to have their picture done, but the little girl obviously was very, very happy to sit on the rug with her doll. Now, if you look where the two girls are in the back, there are two huge urns there, which are life-size. And believe it or not, wherever the family went, whether it was Paris or Rome or wherever, they took those two urns with them. I mean, and they're at least 6 or 7 feet tall. How do I know this? Because those urns today are standing by the picture, which is in the Boston Museum of Arts. Those two urns are there. Okay, that's how I know how tall they are. Okay, so you can see that these people traveled like royalty. They really did. Now, it's a carefully constructed composition of diagonals, rectangles, and squares with the windows open there. And it's the girls, the other two girls are, again, the shy ones. They're the teenagers, and they must have thought it was awfully funny or didn't, for some reason. You know, teenagers can be very recalcitrant, as you know. All right, now, the next one. I'm leading into something with this lady. Whoops, sorry. Wait a minute. Oh, Glorioski. What did I do now? I don't know what I did. All right, here it is. Okay. This is Madame X. It's called Madame X already, but it was actually Madame Gautreau drinking a toast in 1882. This was painted while Sargent was working on the full-length portrait at their home in Saint-Malo in France. Sargent presented this to Virginie Gautreau's mother. Now, who is Virginie Gautreau? She was born in the South, right after the Civil War. And her mother realized that she would not be able to find a wealthy husband because all the planners had gone, as you know, bankrupt and worse. So she decided to take her daughter to Paris to find a suitable marriage for her. Now, this painting was the first painting he did of her. And those flowers in the back, guess what? They're orchids, okay? All right. Now, Sargent presented this to Virginie Gautreau's mother and signed it in the upper right to Madame Avegno, token of friendship. John Singer Sargent was fascinated by her profile with her ski-sloped nose. You can see that the flowers were done in the Impressionist style on the table, and she is wearing a black stole. And Singer Sargent had met Monet in 1876 at the Impressionist exhibit, and consequently, some of the fabric looks like it's done in a very slapdash impressionist way. He would make oil sketches of his works using the quick brushstroke of the Impressionists and Velázquez, whose works he studied. Now, she also wanted her portrait. Now, there was a woman in Boston. Her name was Isabel. Oh my goodness, what was her last name? Isabel Gardner. Yeah, Isabel Gardner, who acquired this work and toward the end of her life, and it was an important document in John Singer Sargent's career. She had wanted her portrait to be the rival of the portrait that I'm going to show you next. And the portrait of her is today at the Gardner Museum in Boston, full length, exactly full length, and in other words, it's a life-size person. And this was the portrait that was done of Madame X, or Virginie Gautreau, in 1883. There it is. And there is the way that it was. Well, all right, okay. When this was shown to the public, the mother said, "You have ruined my daughter." Now, ruined in those days meant that she wouldn't get a decent husband and no man would want her, okay? Indicating that there was something rather shady going on. She was born in 1859. Her father, as I said, was a lawyer and had plantation and business interests. But when the father died, he died during the Civil War at the Battle of Shiloh. Now, the second daughter that they had died of the fever, and after the war, they went to Paris to look for a husband. Well, she found a husband, Pierre Gautreau, who had a fortune in banking and shipping. He was he was 40 years old, she was 19, but she became what is known as a professional beauty because Sargent sought the help of her friends to get her to pose. He wanted to do a painting of her. He chose the black dress from her wardrobe. He chose this, all right? And black was usually the color worn by servants or shopgirls. The dress was considered very daring because there was no corset underneath, all right? It would really be called like a slip dress, the kind of dress that Kennedy's wife wore when she was married, right? The slip dress, which is acceptable today. This was not acceptable, however, because it was really raised your eyebrows, and there were no bells and whistles on it, with all the ruffles and the long sleeves and all the jewelry. You notice she's not wearing any jewelry. It's down to the, shall we say, the essence. You can't make it any less because otherwise it would be pornography. Now, Sargent chose this large format, knowing it could not be ignored by the Salon of 1884, where everybody converged in Paris to see what the artist had done in the past year. Of course, he became as equally notorious as she was. All right. Now, the painting itself is 82.5 inches tall and 43.25 inches wide. The mother said, "My daughter is ruined and all Paris mocks her." The critics called it corpse-like, vulgar, monstrous, lacks technique, insolent ugliness because she wouldn't even look at wouldn't even look at him. Judith Gautier, a woman of that time, said, "A precise image of a modern woman, scrupulously drawn by a painter, a visionary beauty." This was the forward-looking, all right? Now, it was sold to the Metropolitan in 1916. Fortunately, it's in New York. You can go look at it. And he said, that is, Sargent said, he felt it was the best thing he had ever done. Now, initially, when this was painted, here is another one of the sketches of Madame Gautreau that he did prior to, and you can see that it's all hazed out. He was doing it with very, very quick brush strokes. And here, also, when she was relaxing, he decided to do another drawing of her. Now, this is the way the painting looked initially. The two straps, the one strap was off the shoulder, and the mother made him repaint it. And because he said, you're ruining my daughter. And so she made him, this is the way it looked before it was repainted with the strap on the shoulder. So that would make it even more outrageous than what I just showed you if that would have been put into the salon that year, it would have been wow. Okay. Now, here is another one. This is called Carnation Lily Rose. And it was done between 1885 and 86, and this was done in England. Because after the firestorm with Madame Gautreau, he had to go to England, all right? It was just a little too hot for him to remain in France. So he decided to settle there in 1886. And here he began working on projects in the Impressionist style, but with the influence of Monet, whom he visited at Giverny in 1885. Anyone here ever gone to Giverny? Yeah, wonderful, isn't it lovely? Yeah, it's just fabulous. And it's so easy to get there from Paris. You just get on a train and you get to Giverny. It's great. Okay, now, these two girls were the daughters of Frederick Barnard, an illustrator that he knew. They posed daily at sunset in the garden of James Millet for only 20 minutes each time. He wanted to capture a particular kind of light, just like the Impressionists do, okay? He picked that up from Monet. Now, the contrast here is of the fading daylight and the glow of the lanterns around the girls. It was a garden setting, which is, again, another impressionist thing that's done. Impressionists love doing portraits and paintings in a garden. Now, they are surrounded by flowers, but Singer Sargent also added some artificial flowers to the shrubbery and made many sketches of the flowers. It was exhibited in 1887, and it had critical praise and was purchased by the British nation, thus making his reputation in England. In other words, this was a national purchase. It was put into the National Gallery. The title, by the way, comes from a popular song at the time. Was Carnation, Lily, Lily, Rose, and he decided to call it that. All right, now we're going to move. Wait a minute. Oh no, I'm sorry. Now there is Claude Monet painting in his in the garden of his studio, and this is the picture by John Singer Sargent, done in the Impressionist style. Now here. This is the next one. This is Isabella Stewart Gardner. She wanted a picture that would, in other words, she wanted a clone of Madame Gautreau. She wanted this work to be the rival of Madame X, which was, the portrait was not called Virginie Gautreau, it was called Madame X, okay, which again made it also, who is this Madame X? But of course she was famous, so they knew who Madame X was. Now, she was posed in her Boston home. It is a marvelous interplay of circles, the halo effect of the wall covering, the circle created by the arms, and the circle effects of the jewelry. She's wearing jewelry around her waist, okay? Unlike Madame Gautreau, her gaze is straightforward, but reserved, as if assessing the impression she is making. The neckline of her dress echoes Madame X, but it is more modest to say that to say that she can get attention without being immodest, wearing immodest attire. But her arms are painted very sensually. John Singer Sargent was paid $3,000 for the portrait. Doesn't seem like much today, but this was done in 1888. All right, so that would have been a whole lot more money. Her husband was still alive at the time, and he asked her that it not be displayed publicly during his lifetime. Now it is displayed at the Gardner Museum in Boston. But if you go to the Gardner Museum in Boston, I would sincerely tell you that you have to take a flashlight with you, because in her will, she specified that everything had to remain exactly the way it was. And this was back in the 1890s. So that when you go into this to see this painting, you better have a flashlight, because you're going to have a hard time seeing it, because they're still using those little old-fashioned bulbs, you know, like those early Edison bulbs. And when I went there, I saw there was a screen, a folding screen in one of the rooms. I mean, this is an elegant, museum. I said, why is there a screen? So nosy Marianne looks behind the screen, and you know why they had the screen there? The wallpaper was coming off the wall, and it was hanging. So I mean, but they can't break her will. They can't do anything. It's dark. It's very, very musty looking, and it's the chairs have the original upholstery of 100 years ago. You can imagine what those chairs look like. I mean, the dust will eat it up. If you don't sit in the chair, the dust will still eat it up, and all those fabrics will just kind of fall apart. And that's exactly what's happening. So anyway, that's why I say to you, we better take a flashlight. And you also know that's where the 1993 thievery was, three or four famous paintings, one of them being Rembrandt's only water scene, and that was stolen, and we still don't know where those paintings are. Okay, Now, let's look to the next one. And this one is one of my favorites. Thank God it's at the Met in New York. No, wait a minute. All right, this is Mrs. Hugh Hammersley from 1892. It's a very inventive composition, one of Singer Sargent's best. This is a society portrait, but her alert expression and lively pose as if actually, she looks like she's getting ready to move and invite you to sit with her. And boy, I'd love to sit with her. Can you imagine what she would be able to tell us? Oh, God, it'd be fabulous. All right, now, the gold background sets off the elegant red velvet of her gown. Texturing of the dress is masterful, and that you don't see here, but you will see it in 3 dimension when you go to the Met. Even more impressive is his mastery of the gold lace trim and portrait collar. Now let's look at that. I'm going to give you a close-up of that. Look at that. That's gold lace, and it's done so beautifully. And the expression on her face. She also, by the way, wears a diamond star in her hair. Now, that was the piece of jewelry to have during the Gilded Age. Every girl, when she got married, her parents would give her a gold diamond star to wear in her hair after she was married, because a woman never wore diamonds when she was single. She only wore diamonds after she married, when her husband would provide them for, or fancy jewelry. In other words, if you were 18 years old and you could not wear adult jewelry until you married, okay? So she's wearing that ornament. Now, Jenny Churchill also wore one, as did her sisters. And Jenny Churchill, when she married into the royalty of Blenheim, also had a diamond star. But when her youngest sister died, her mother wrote Jenny Churchill a note asking her to return the star to her so that it could be given to the youngest sister when she married. By then, the Jerome fortune, which you know initiated in Brooklyn, because they were 3 girls from Brooklyn, and the mother took them there because she wanted to have fashionable marriages for them. And so by that time, the Jerome fortune was basically gone. The mother was living in a little apartment, and half the time she didn't have the fireplace on because she simply had no money. So she had to get that one piece of jewelry to give it to the younger daughter. Now here is Helen Sears. She's a 6-year-old little girl. I'm going to show you her mother's picture in a moment. She is set among blue and white chrysanthemums and hydrangeas. And he could do wonders with painting children, and he enjoyed painting children, by the way. This is the 3rd child's portrait that we've seen. There are very few artists who can really do wonderful paintings of children, and he was one, and so was Mary Cassatt and also Auguste Renoir. Renoir loved kids. He once painted a little girl who was crying because she had been scolded. He said, "Don't cry and I'll do your picture." He did the painting. The painting is at the Metropolitan Museum today. Okay, if you want to see, the tears are coming down her face, but he made the picture of her. Okay. All right, now. Her mother was an artist and photographer and were friends with John Singer Sargent and Mary Cassatt as well. Sears was a patron of the arts, a friend of Isabel Gardner, by the way. They were also rivals in their support of the arts. Now here is the mother, Sarah Choate Sears. She was an artist and photographer, a friend of John Singer Sargent, whom she photographed, by the way. She exhibited her work at the Columbian Exposition of 1893 and at the Royal Photographic Society in London. She also supported the American artist Maurice Prendergast, who was from New York. Here she is posed alert, self-confident, with the intense gaze. A wonderful rendering of that white satin dress. Now, with the highlights on it. Now, John Singer Sargent had many of his subjects dressed in white to show the bravura effects that he could create with this. Now, the next one is another knockout piece. Absolutely wow. This will wow you. The Wyndham Sisters, 3 of them, 1899. This bravura performance, look at the right angle composition. That is to say, it goes from the first woman all the way up to where the mother is. The mother's picture is hanging on the wall, and these are the three daughters. And they are sitting there and enveloped in these beautiful white gowns, absolutely fabulous. And you see, you don't see it here, but when you see this is at the Metropolitan in New York. When you see it there, you can see the highlights and everything else, and it's posed very casually. I mean, there's only one of them that's actually looking directly at him. The other two are just profiles, okay? Now, let me see what else we're going to say. Most Victorian women, now, wore lots of jewelry, as I told you. But John Singer Sargent's subjects were ordered to use a minimal amount of jewelry, and I am sure he wanted to do this because he wanted the fabric and the clothes to outshine the jewelry, so that you really don't see any jewelry on them, okay? And so, all right, now here is a picture of Jenny Churchill that was done in 1899, that was done for a cover-up program of concerts and entertainments given to raise money for a hospital ship to be sent to South Africa. Remember, that was the time of the Boer War, all right? And the women in London, the upper class, decided they were going to buy a boat and they were going to outfit it and they were going to take it to South America to service the British who had been wounded. Now, so this picture was put on the cover of the book. Now, I think it is probably the best portrait ever of Jenny Churchill. It shows her to be a very determined woman. She was very determined throughout her life. A little bit outspoken, very daring, took many lovers, but it's absolutely perfect. That defines what her temperament is like. Now, let me see. She was working, as I said, on this project with the boat, and one of her niece by marriage was none other than Consuelo Vanderbilt, okay, who had married into the Marlborough family and lived in Blenheim. So one of the best images of her. Now, I'm going to show you, this is the painting of the Duke and Duchess of Marlborough in 1895. Well, no, this would have been a little bit later. No, this was done in 1906, I'm sorry. They were married in 1895. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of, in fact, I'm probably going to digress because I have an interesting story to tell you, okay? And it begins with this lady, Consuelo Vanderbilt. Now, I'm going to discuss the painting, and then I'm going to go into some details about it. First of all, the figures are arranged on the staircase and it's a huge painting. I've been to Blenheim, I've seen it. It's a life-size painting. This is not these little miniatures, because they all love the bigger, the better, okay? So this is a huge painting. The figures are arranged in a staircase in a pyramidal composition. Consuelo was 6 inches taller than the Duke, so he could not put the two of them together. The Duke is at the bottom wearing the robes of a, let's see, the Duke, the robes of a, of his dukedom. Okay, that's all right. Now, Consuelo's dowry was what saved Blenheim a huge amount of art, and as a huge amount of arts and treasures had been sold off by his father. Blenheim was a large house, 187 rooms, bigger than a hotel, okay? Spread out on they had thousands of acres, and they still have thousands of acres, but it's spread out on the acreage. Now, but they had sold off at least 18 Rubens paintings, 2 Rembrandts, 8 Van Dycks, 2 Titians, 1 works by Watteau, and a library that consisted of 20,000 volumes. Now, can you imagine the size of the library? Okay? All right, now, however, as I said, they had 187 rooms, but they had only one bathroom, which I assure you was used only by the family. I don't know what the staff did, and they had to have a large staff, but I'm leaving that to your imagination, all right? I'm not going to get involved with that. So Blenheim was being stripped. As I said, until 1890, there was only one bathroom in the palace. Now, Sargent paints a charming domestic scene with the King Charles spaniels in there and two well-behaved children who looked absolutely charming, don't they? And the Duke in his Order of the Garter robe. But by 1905, the marriage was in trouble. And by 1906, she separated from him. They did not divorce until 1921, but she was very, very friendly with Winston Churchill. Winston, who helped her a lot, especially when she decided to get divorced. He supported her and helped her immeasurably, and they had a wonderful friendship together, which is very nice indeed. Now, I want to show you the next one here. This is another sketch that he did of her. Oh, there's Blenheim. This is a bad picture, but this is only part of Blenheim because they just kept on spreading out, okay? And remember, this house, they began building it around between, I believe, 1702 and 1710, which means in 1895, it was already almost 200 years old, and it was falling apart. That's why they were selling off all the art to try and fix it up. Now, she married him, and the dowry that was fixed upon her in 1895 was $42.5 million, which is like, you know, I mean, you can't even compare it to today. $42.5 million, which enabled them to fix up Blenheim and put in bathrooms. So when you go to Blenheim and you go into the bathroom, you could say, this is my bathroom, because it's an American bathroom. So that's the reason why they married, not because there was any love. Now, I suppose I may as well just go into the story that I want to tell you. And this story ends in a very unusual place. You will be quite surprised. She married him, he was 18 years old, married him on my birthday, November 6, 1895, to the 9th Duke. And in other words, a lot of that money was used to, again, fix up the bathrooms. She was 20 minutes late to church because she did not want to marry him. She was crying with her father. The father could do nothing because Alma was like a hurricane. We would have a Hurricane Alma because her mother was just like that. She was like a hurricane, and she would not be crossed in any way. The newspaper later said, quote, she looked sad and appeared to have been crying. Yeah, she was crying. She didn't want to marry him because she had someone, a suitor that had come, and she fell in love with him. The suitor was a man from New Jersey. Now, his name was Rutherford, Winthrop Rutherford. He was, and the mother thought he was a fortune hunter, but he wasn't. He was descended from the Stuyvesant family, from Peter Stuyvesant, and also from John Winthrop, who started the Massachusetts Bay Colony. That's why he got the name Winthrop Rutherford. Now, the mother made sure, now he even followed them to Europe, but the mother made sure he was not admitted even after following her to Europe. He was a wealthy landowner. His estate is in Alamuchee, New Jersey, and I'm going to show you the picture of the Alamuchee, New Jersey, and if you are interested in going there, I can give you the address. Because, well, I mean, it's a gorgeous house. It's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, this was not a little, little 4-room cottage. We're talking about 70 or 80 rooms in this house. So anyway, what happened was this. Consuelo marries Charles Spencer. Very unhappy marriage. But Rutherford then turned around and married a woman named Lucy Mercer. Now, Lucy was his second wife because Rutherford had a wife, and she had 6 children. And a few months after the last baby was born, she died of, believe it or not, appendicitis. which could easily have been taken care of today. But remember, there was no penicillin in 1920. There was no penicillin. Okay, so she died. He needed a mother for his 6 children, and he married Lucy Lucy Mercer, who had been the social secretary to Eleanor Roosevelt in 1918. But there were incriminating letters that led to her dismissal, and she broke from FDR. The indications were that they were lovers, all right, and very much so. So she married Rutherford in 1921 and was the stepmother to his children, and she also had a daughter with him. Now, remember, by 1921, she is free, Consuela is free of the Duke, and she married someone else, a Frenchman who was a flyer and an aeronautical engineer. Now, let's fast forward to 1945. Lucy had her portrait painted by a woman named Elizabeth Shumatov, who, despite her Russian name, was actually a Ukrainian artist. As a matter of fact, she even went on to paint the portraits of LBJ, President Johnson, and his wife, and she also did a number of paintings. She lived to be 92, and again, she died in 1980, but she had, by that time, painted LBJ and his wife. Now, Lucy had her portrait painted by Elizabeth Shumatov, and she persuaded Elizabeth to accompany her to Warm Springs, Georgia, because she said, this will be an opportunity for you to paint the president. Oh, that was nice. So they went down to Warm Springs, Georgia, and initially Elizabeth didn't want to do it, but then she realized it'd be a wonderful opportunity for her, you know, and it would be, she might be able to get other people to paint. Now, on April 12th, 1945, while being painted by FDR, when painting FDR, he said, "Oh my, I have such a headache." And he passed out and died an hour later. And Lucy Mercer was with him when he died. This was April 12th, 1945. Within an hour, he was dead. Lucy Mercer was with him when he died. But Eleanor Roosevelt knew nothing about it. She found out afterward that it had been arranged by Anna Roosevelt that she should go down there to spend time with FDR. They never stopped loving each other. And it is also mentioned that they may have had liaisons at certain times. And as a matter of fact, even if you look on it online, you will see that she is mentioned as his mistress. But I think it was a genuine. Anna Roosevelt must have known that her father wanted to see this woman before she died. She must have seen what her father looked like, because when he came back from Tehran, he looked terrible. And Eleanor Roosevelt was devastated by the betrayal of her daughter. And this is Blenheim. I'm now going to show you Rutherford Hall in the Alamuchi Mountains. Wait a minute here, if I can just get there. Oh, that's another picture. It's got a quick drawing he did of Consuelo Vanderbilt, looking quite happy and nice. She did have a happy life when she married her second husband. Now this is Rutherford Hall, and this is just the facade. It's got at least 60 rooms. If you want to know the address, you know, the summer is coming. It would be lovely for you to drive up to Alamuchi and look at Rutherford Hall. It is used, they do use it. The house was initially built in 1902, and they do utilize it for lectures, dances. I believe you can even have a wedding there if you want, okay? Now, it's the location is 1686 County Road 517 in Alamuchi, New Jersey. And it would be a lovely thing for you to try to go see it this summer. Summer's coming. Where we go? Well, let's go to Alamuchi, okay? My father, I know, used to go to Alamuchi, and I believe he may have done when he hunted there, but he stopped hunting a number of years before he died, and I'm so glad he did. I said, "Oh, Dad, you're always killing those deers." And my father said to me, "Hun, if we did not cull the herd, believe me, they would be in your backyard." And I laughed. I said, "Oh, Dad," I said, "don't be silly." Well, believe it or not, I have deer in my backyard, and they ruin my tomatoes every year. And I don't know if anybody can tell me how to keep the deer away from the tomatoes. I swear to God, I'll give you money. Honestly, and I'll give you half of my crop. But it's a shame. It really, really is a shame. So that's my story from Consuelo Vanderbilt in 1895 to 1945, where the story kind of continued. Okay.
When you said they never stopped loving each other, did you mean FDR and Lucy?
What?
When you said they never stopped loving each other, were you referring to FDR?
I'm referring to FDR and Lucy Mercer. Okay. Yes. Again, she found incriminating letters in a suitcase. He had gone away on a trip for some reason, and she was unpacking the bag, and she sees the letters in there. Obviously, he was trying to hide them from her, and she immediately dismissed Lucy. And so Lucy, about a year or two later, married Winthrop Rutherford and lived in that house. She lived until 1948. So she died 3 years after Roosevelt did. Okay, now we can go on a little bit. I wanted to do this digression because I felt it was just so interesting to see how history can go from one thing and all of a sudden 50 years later it's dealing with the president. All right, let's see now. This one is called Repose in 1911, also called Nonchaloir or Nonchalance in French. This is his niece, striking the pose of reverie, similar to the pose of Berthe Morisot in one of the paintings by Manet. But she's slumped in the chair and her head is back. But that dress, by this time, he was so tired of doing society portraits. He took his art in a different direction. Her dress is masterful and just demonstrates his acute observation of texture and shading. The cut off at the side there, it's cut off. That's another trend from the Impressionists. When the Impressionists saw the first pictures, done with the camera, I said, look, it's cut off here and it's cut off there. So we can also cut it off our pictures, okay? Which they did. Now, and the loose brushstrokes also shows his embrace of the tenets of Impressionism. Then here's the next one, El Halio. There's El Halio. He began this travels in Europe and North Africa in 1879. He was very attracted to Spain. This is one of his most famous works, now in the Gardner Museum. It's a very large painting, by the way. There's a strong diagonal lighting that comes that lights the main figure, whose pose there, give us a sense of movement. The shimmery highlights on the dress, set off by the black background, and it's by the way, it's 8 by 12 feet, okay? Done in Paris with a French model. It was not done in Spain. But there's high theatricality. There's the musicians behind, okay? And they are clapping, the usual clapping went for a flamenco, and something completely different. It was, in other words, he was trying to get away from all those portraits. Here's another one. This one in Venice, 1903, clearly shows how he had embraced the Impressionist light and shadow, shimmering reflections, and varying colors of the stone. And much of it looks like the brushstrokes are slab-like. Well, those brushstrokes were also done that way by none other than Claude Monet, and I'm sure that's where he picked that up from. Here's another one. Now, this even shows you're in a gondola. You see the front part of a gondola, and you're in the gondola, and you're going down the canal, and again those slab-like paint strokes. He loved being in Venice. He truly did. Now here's the Venetian Canal. All right, the wonderful Venetian Canal. 1905? Yeah, Venetian Canal. And now here is another one. This is done in Granada in 1912. It is watercolor on crayon. Now, that's unusual. He had to be very, very artistically masterful to be able to blend two different mediums and put it on one canvas. The Impressionists did it, especially Degas. Degas would use crayon, and then he would use oil paint, and maybe he'll put a little bit of watercolor here or there. So he might have also got that from Degas, but this is a watercolor of a garden, and also with watercolor and crayon as well. Here's another one, two girls with Paris at Fladbury. Fladbury is a village in England. The oil shows that his mastery of the Impressionist technique. The theme of women in a garden was especially popular with Monet. And you'll see many pictures of his wife and people walking in a garden. Note how the face and hands are barely sketched in. His main concern here is color and light, not creating a valid image. Now here in 1925, 22 to 25, he accepted the commission to paint the murals at the rotunda and stairway of the Museum of Fine Arts. This mural was done for the staircase, and it shows Apollo in his sun chariot. Apollo was the gods of art and creativity. His companions were the Muses, the daughters of Zeus and Menanope, which include Clio, Calliope, Euterpe, and also Urania. So here is what he did not get to see because he had died before, but it was still mounted there, and it still is there at the Museum of Boston. Now, the next artist I'm going to talk about is this man, the man in the middle there, standing right in front of that portrait, and that is James McNeill Whistler, who was another American artist who became an expatriate and went to England and France. Now, this painting was done by Fantin Latour, and it's called Homage to Delacroix. Delacroix is the man in the picture, and he was a famous artist in France in the 19th century. Whistler stands in front. Seated, and each of these people can be identified. Seated is Champfleury, and behind him is Manet, all right, Manet, which is one of his friends, and Bracquemond, Charles Baudelaire, the poet and critic, and let's see now, Edmond Duranty and Louis Cordier. These were all artists and writers at the time, and we all got together in order to do this group portrait and showing their homage to Delacroix, who had died. Okay, now this is another Whistler's. Whistler, again, as I told you, an expatriate, went from, I believe he was born in Massachusetts or New York, and he also went to Europe. This is called At the Piano. These are portraits of his half-sister Deborah and his niece Annie. The piano belonged to the father, who died that year. They are both wearing mourning. Now, the little girl is wearing a white dress. That also can be used in mourning. Rather than putting a child in a black dress, a white dress can also be used in mourning. It is a somber painting with simple, bold colors. Note the cut-off paintings and the edge of the piano. You see how they cut off the paintings? That's come from the Impressionists. Now, here's one called The White Girl, 1862, also called Symphony in White, No. 1. This is how he would name his paintings, because he was so involved with color. He would like to use a symphony, chorus, whatever. He would use musical terms to name his paintings. This is the portrait of his mistress, Jo Heffernan. The Symphony in White, she is posed on a white dress before a cream backdrop. There is a beige bear rug that she's standing on, and with flowers on the figure. It was evenly lit. The shadows on the folds of the drapery, the desk and the drapery, are not well seen. Throughout his career, Whistler was interested in the interplay of color, and hence many of his works are subtitled, as I said, Symphony or Harmony. He was to explore harmonies not only in his portraits, but also in his seascapes. This was shown at the Salon de Refusés in Paris in 1863. It was rejected at the Royal Academy Salon in London, but it was at what they call the Salon de Refusé. In other words, what happened was he asked the salon, England, Paris Salon, to accept it. They refused it, and there were so many people that had been refused that they opened up another museum and they put in all the ones that had been refused, so that's where that painting landed up. Now, here is Joe Heffernan. It's called she was absolute Joe, called La Belle Irlandaise, the beautiful Irish girl from 1886. She had gorgeous red hair, and this was done by Courbet, another artist whose ability to paint hair was unparalleled. He captures the waves, the texture, the color, and the highlights, showing his expertise, which Courbet, a realist, much admired by the newer generation, including James McNeill Whistler. Courbet was also quite an egotist who liked to show off. Now here is, of course, the very, very famous portrait of his mother. Yeah, arrangement in gray and black, number 1, okay? His mother sat as the intended model who had fallen ill. She was going to initially stand, but she's rather frail, so he sat her. Okay, she sat down. And she kind of, it forms a backwards L, okay, and then above her is a painting that hangs directly above her. But if you look at all of these things, they are either rectangles or squares, and the rectangular wall behind her, all right? Now, her costume and her serious demeanor show her strong Protestant ethic. On the wall is his etching, Black Lion Wharf. That's one of the etchings that he did. The face, the lace, and the cap and her hands are painted very carefully. It was bought in France and now is at the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. It's not here in America, it's in Paris. He was also given by the French the Légion d'honneur, which is a very, very prestigious medal to be given. The Legion d'honneur was also given, believe it or not, to Clint Eastwood. So it's not just it's a French award, but it's not just for French people. It's for other people who have made lasting impression on the arts. Now here again, basically the same pose. Thomas Carlyle. This one is called Arrangement in Black and Gray, number 2. Thomas Carlyle was a historian, and he agreed to sit as James McNeill Whistler wanted to do another work utilizing the same combination of colors that he had used on his mother's portrait. The emphasis again is on rectangles. Notice even the chair rails there. Throughout his career, he likened his work to music with the interplay of themes, hence his use of all that musical terminology. Now here's another one. Henry Irving was a very well-known actor on the stage in London in the 19th century. Now Henry, and many times the parts they did were so famous that they were painted in that particular part. So this is Henry Irving as Philip II in 1876. Irving appeared as Philip in Tennyson's play Queen Mary in 1896. It was fashionable, as I said, for an actor to do this. Irving was famous for his role in Macbeth, Hamlet, Othello, and Shylock. It's called Arrangement in Black, number 3. Okay? The work itself echoes Velázquez's portrait of Philip IV, which I'm going to show you. The strips of gold and white bring the figure in focus and anchor it to the ground. We have a feeling that he's not floating, okay? Now, I'm going to show you the picture from Velázquez in 1624, and you will see what I'm talking about. The exact same pose. And again, the dark background. The Spanish always appear in these dark things. The men especially would always wear black clothing and black capes and whatnot. But that is Philip IV, one of many of standing portraits that were done by Velázquez, because Velázquez was the court portraitist for Philip IV. He was the one that did all the court portraits, including Las Menenas, the little girl. That's okay. All right, now he managed to get a placing a figure in space without any props and using it to an anchor, props used to anchor the figure to the floor. There was no table there, there was no chair, nothing of that sort. It's just him. Now here is another one. The pose is very, very similar. It's Lady Muir, and it's called Arrangement in Black, number 5. She was an English socialite, and important commission was after a lawsuit against Ruskin left James McNeill Whistler bankrupt. Now, without the fox wrap enveloping her, she would merge with the background. She's elegant with diamonds, appears to ready to drop the wrap to the floor. Seen by the Prince of Wales in his studio and commended. The Prince of Wales went to Whistler's studio and commended him on it. The Salon of 1882, the critic called her Venus. By the way, she was the wife of a brewer, and she had formerly been a barmaid. Okay, so Lady Mew, all right. Now, here's another one. This is a famous one. This is at the Metropolitan. It's Theodore Doré. It's called An Arrangement in Flesh Color and Black. Doré was a critic and also an art collector and a friend of the Impressionists. He holds a pink-lined cape, which is called the domino, with a fan. Now, the fan, he was not gay, all right? I want to clear that. He's walking with a fan. He's not gay. James McNeill Whistler wanted it to be part of the color scheme, all right? So he made him hold the fan. And the cartouche in the bottom shows you where, I think it, wait a minute, this is, all right, right about here. Oh, wait a minute, I can't seem to, let me see if I can, let me see, the cartouche I'm looking for. Oh, there it is, this is the cartouche right here, and the cartouche is also in pink. There is the cartouche, okay? So, in other words, it's the way he did his work. Now, let's see, we have a few more that I'd like you to, this one is The Falling Rocket from 1875. It's called Nocturne in Black and Gold, and he painted the fireworks over the Cremore Pleasure Gardens in London. It was exhibited at the Grosvenor Gallery in 1877. John Ruskin, was a critic, a critic and writer of criticism about art. John Ruskin, a respected critic and writer on art, he wrote a book called The Stones of Venice, castigated James McNeill Whistler for his Cockney impudence and ill-educated conceit for charging 200 guineas for flinging a pot of paint in the public face. Now, that was done publicly, and it was, Whistler was very upset about this. Whistler promptly sued him for £1,000 and court costs. Now, £1,000 is a lot of money then, all right? More than you can imagine. All right. The case came to trial in 1879 due to Ruskin's illness. Ruskin was very ill. The court found for James McNeill Whistler, but he only got 1 farthing and no court costs. He only got 1 farthing, but James McNeill Whistler was conceded. We didn't get £1,000. He got 1 farthing, and that's like maybe 50 cents. All right. This bankrupted him, all right, because he had hired a lawyer and whatnot. He sold his house, went to Venice for a year, and doing a series of etchings. He returned in 1881 and did another portrait of Lady Muir. Now, I'm going to show him one of the last things he did, which was just marvelous. It's called the Peacock Room. The Peacock Room was the dining room of Frederick Leyland, a collector of Oriental porcelains. The architect consulted him on the dining room, and James McNeill Whistler got to work, making bold revisions without telling the architect or the owner. In other words, he decided, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, but he didn't tell them. So in other words, when the architect and the owner came, they practically passed it away, all right? The pattern of peacock feathers, there's also a pattern of peacock feathers on the ceiling. The walls were of cordovan leather. They are leather walls, not paper walls, painted with roaring peacocks, alluding to the fact that Leyland balked at paying 2,000 guineas for what he hadn't ordered. It's like, you know, they give you you had a dinner, and they give you, well, here's your bill, and it's a lobster, and you only had a hamburger. Do you know what I mean? You know, this is outrageous. Finally, Frederick Leland finally settled paying 1,000 guineas, and I'm sorry, 1,000 pounds, not guineas, because a guinea is a pound and a 1 pound and another farthing or whatever. So he paid less, but and James McNeill Whistler never saw the room again. So that was, I mean, to do that was kind of silly on his part without informing anybody. Hey, would you like this? Would you want me to modify it? Do you want me to change it? No, he just did it. Okay. I want to thank you so much for spending your time with me today. Maybe I'll see you again sometimes during the summer. I think we're going to plan something for maybe for July or August. And I hope to see you all again. And thank you for all your attention. Thank you very much.